Okay, we're going to start now. This is the last shiur of Hilchos Mikvos. It's a shiur which I was asked to do about boir al boir, and what I printed for you over here is pretty much only from the Rabbi. And boir al boir. It's important to understand. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm going to go through various different nekudas. I want to start with, the first page. Takones hamikveh shel Chak Admur Mahorashab. This is Rabbi Yankel Landau's reshima of the takones of the Rebbe Rashab. He starts by saying, "It's in Kodesh Chak Admur of Gam Ziyahu Yeshiyasu mikveh al gabe mikveh." Make a mikveh on top of a mikveh. And he explains. The bottom one, there's going to be rainwater. The bottom boir. Then there's a floor. On top of the floor is regular water. That in there you will toivel. Then he adds his own understanding. He gives a theory. It doesn't say if this is from the Rebbe Rashab or not, that the reason the Rebbe Rashab wanted the mikveh boir with the rainwater on the bottom is to ensure that the water will change less often than boir b'tzad boir of hashoka. And he says, "Hashoka tiyeh al yedei nekev shemachzik tefach al tefach." The hole connecting the two boiris is tefach al tefach. Ubetaymo shel davar. Why is it such a big hole? Nemalin pikoche. He says the Rebbe Rashab told him, she'achshav mezvan dibur ein zecher avohil time bozeh. He says now he doesn't remember what the reason, but it's going to be there was a reason over here. Shiur shnei nekovim Kolel. There should be two holes. Two holes in the cover that covers the bottom boir. Why? It was a pashut mechashash ulei ikre pam shisasim echad mehem v'lei yagishu bazeh. Sometimes one of them could get closed. You step on one, and therefore you always want to have an open hole. Okay, then it goes into other details that we discussed about it. We'll go skip to Daled.
Why is it also big at that time? Why is it also big?
There's different svaras. We're going to get the Rebbe in a letter mentions a certain svara about it. Not really a svara, but there is a explanation. Myself in Tikkunei Mikvos, you have in the back the letter from Rabbi Ashkenazi from Chabad. He gives a theory why tefach al tefach more than stam sheshver sanoid. That being if it's Ashoka. But the idea, we're going to soon see you afterwards. You look in Tikkunei Mikvos, and I'll show you where to look over there. Beritzba shel ben shneim yeshayish k'midas adam beracham al amo, k'dei sheyeh efshel l'kanas sham l'tachtenu na'gevoises ma shesach l'achifis me'akshamim. The floor should have an opening. You could go in and clean it. You have to remove the cover when you fill up the mikveh. When you fill up the water, the cover has to be off.
What do we use nowadays for this cover? Use shayish?
You could use shayish. Some people use concrete cover.
It's very heavy. Is it heavy?
How often do you pick it up? When you need to pick it up, you pick it up. You don't pick it up every day. V'shehamayim yalu al gdois haritzpa, and that the water should go above the floor. And then he says that the reason he doesn't say there was some kind of discussion between them. He doesn't remember what. You fill up the rainwater until it covers the floor. Okay, that is pretty much the yesodus of a mikveh al gabe mikveh. Then he gives the sizes of the mikveh. The water has to come in through amshacha, opening the cork of the oitzer, and in ois test talmid ratzui. It's always important. There should be a reservoir of rainwater. It should be ready to change. And next to that machsan, next to this reservoir, there should be another empty one. It went from the Oitzer to a Hamshacha, from where Karka Roy, and from there it went to the mikveh. That's where the opening, where the cork was, and from there would fall. That's where the Hamshacha would be. Means there's a second opening. There is a oitzer, and then you have the cork by the boir, and in that by the second hole right next to it, and from there you pull the cork, and the cork water falls into that boir, and from there it flows to make another an extension to the water. Okay, now there are a few details which are very important to understand. The Rebbe explains in the Yesod of the mikveh of the Rebbe Rashab. Now, the first thing that I bring to you this is from Shulchan Menachem, page Kuf Menachem, is the Rebbe's letters. You have over here quite some sharp letters from the Rebbe about Lubavitcher's Dafka building, Boir al Gabi Boir, Mesirus Nefesh, to do it. On the second page, Kuf Nun Beis, you have a very interesting letter. The Rebbe explains the Maila of Boir al Gabi Boir, which is not written in the Rebbe Rashab's letter. Oidois inyan bnias hamikveh petach tikveh b'negel tochnis shetihi hamikveh al gabi mikveh v'hatoelius shebedover. Regarding building a mikveh in Petach Tikva, what are the milas and the boir al gabi boir? Af she'ein hazman grome le'ayin bozeh v'lichteiv ba'arichos adrusha. Although there's not enough time to discuss and explain the milas, lichoira pashut. It's a simple thing. That the best, the toyelas, the biggest benefit from building in this form, and when you're toiveling in the boir al gabe boir, you're toiveling in the rainwater, in the actual boir of rainwater. You're not toiveling in a boir that's being muchshar to another boir. You're toiveling ba'oitzer atzmai. It's one boir which has something separating into two parts. And the floor, it becomes bottled due to the holes that are in it. Yeah, the Rebbe, first Nikud over here to understand, the Rebbe looks at this mikveh. It's not a hashaka. It's not that you have a boir of pasula water, and next to it a boir of kosher water, and it just touches and it becomes kosher, or water that became kosher. This is water you're toiveling in the boir of Meik Shammai. He wrote his own svara. That's he wrote in parentheses. He didn't say that Rebbe Rashab told him that's his svara. I mentioned it. I mentioned it right when we started. It's in parentheses, and I said that's his svara. It seems like it's his svara. The Rebbe's svara is, first of all, Bianca Anda looked at it as all as hashaka concept. The Rebbe Bichlal didn't acknowledge the concept of hashaka completely. The Rebbe converted completely to a zriya mikveh. The Rebbe understood and explained the mikveh of the Rebbe Rashab as a zriya mikveh. It's evident from the Rebbe's letters and other places, I didn't print all of them, that the Rebbe held very strongly of the concept of zriya more than hashaka. And which is why the Rebbe wanted...
Is that also the more conventional zriya, or only this kind of zriya?
The idea of zriya.
Yeah,
and then the way we do it, the Rebbe explained the Rebbe Rashab's mikveh to fit into zriya.
But zriya from the permanent side.
When there was a shaila of a mikveh that can't do boir al gabe boir, you're going to see later there's a letter from the Rebbe to make boir hashaka and boir zriya. The Rebbe was not reliant only on a boir hashaka. He wanted also a zriya.
Not even a boir zriya alone.
On a boir zriya alone, I'm not sure. there's a mashmos from a letter that might be the Rebbe preferred the Bar Zriya over a Bar Hashaka when you only have a chance to do one. But I did not locate that letter. I remember learning it in the past, and I didn't locate it as of yet.
You look at the miles of the Bar Zriya and the mile of Bar
We're going to get to that. I'll explain when we get to the milas of Bar Zriya over Hashaka. Even though I already explained it in the Shiur, we'll get to it. Well,
nowadays, with chlorine and filters, you can table and make some actual water for it.
If you have the Mei Galim filter, you could table and make shaman for years, yeah.
So you don't need any other birds.
You still do barak of a bird.
What?
Because you don't mevat it. Okay, so now over here, the first nakuda to look at it is the Rebbe looks at this mikveh. It's not a hashaka. It's not even a zriya. You're toivel in the rainwater. Toiveling in the one boil of rainwater. It's not a boil that's next to a boil. It's one big boil. So understand the Maila, and the Rebbe says Pashut Hadavar. Not everybody seems to understand it as a Pashut Hadavar, but that's how the Rebbe understood it.
The holes get stuffed.
The holes don't get stuffed.
If it does.
You unstuff them.
No, I'm saying if it's Zriya, then it should be.
If it's Zriya, then it's not a problem, yeah?
If it's one bird, then it is a problem.
If it's one boil, why? It's one boil. It becomes Zriya, and we're going to get to it soon. We're going to get to the thing of it. Now, let's continue to the next page, Kuf Nun Gimel. There is a letter from the Rebbe where the Rebbe explains the reason for, actually go to page Kuf Nun Daled first, because it really should be before page Kuf Nun Gimel. Kuf Nun Daled, there is in Rabbi Yankel Lando's Reshima, like we mentioned, that he wanted that the water should go above the floor. The Rebbe writes, Ulai Efshar Leimar Hatam. Could be the reason is first svara the Rebbe gives, why do we need to overflow with rainwater? Maybe the floor of the mikveh is not straight, and you have gimelugim, and then this whole mikveh is not going to become kosher only through hashaka. Doesn't say what's the alternative. It's going to be kosher through zriya. If not for that, it's going to be kosher through zriya. How is it going to be kosher through zriya? That's the next letter. Masha Kosafti, this is a letter right after the previous letter, to the same person. Hatam lefian yuzdaiti beros chakadun morashav shamayim the mikvah tachtani chasu ritzpas mikvah aliyona terem yizrimu l'sham mayim shovim. The reason that the Rebbe says, I think the reason why the Rebbe Rashab wanted that the rainwater should overflow the bottom boil, overflow the floor, completely overflow the floor before you add city water. Nimuki Pashut, simple reason. Ki oz tiye nesinas mayim she'uvim b'mikveh ksheiro. Then what you're doing is, this is the reason that it says, you're adding mayim she'uvim into a kosher mikveh. That means you have, no, because the Rebbe already understands that it's one boy, it's one mikveh. You have,
Only one boy if you do it this way. If you don't do it like that, you won't use it in one boy.
if what?
If you don't overflow it, and then you put it out, it won't be.
If you don't because then if you have city water that's collecting on the side before it becomes one, it's not one boy.
So then it will be just
Ashaka. He says, the Kalahavan. Simple to understand. All these letters are not that simple, but the Rebbe takes them. I see the Rebbe says Pashut and Pashut and Pashut in all these letters. Over here, this is the second letter. The Rebbe says explains. If you overflow the water into the top boil, then when you add city water into that water, you're just like adding mayim she'uvim into a mikveh of more than 40 sa'ah. You're not taking out any water. And the Shulchan Aruch, clearly it says you add into a mikveh, it's bichlal, you don't count, all that water becomes batal. It's all you're toiveling in rainwater, in a mikveh ksheir. Now let's go back to page Kuf Nun Gimel.
Practically,
Yeah,
you remove that lid over there, you pour out the rainwater, then once it's overflowing,
you put the lid up.
you put it on.
Yeah. Back to page Kuf Nun Gimel. Be'inyan ha'mikveh. Yeah? So over here talking about they made a mikveh and they added a zriya on the side. The Rebbe writes, "Mashakosu she'osu oid oitza min hatzad kedei shetihiyeh gam kein zriya." You added a second boil to have zriya. In al pi oifen the chakat murna she mikvah al gabi oitza, the Rebbe Rashav's mikvah, which is the boil al gabi boil. V'hu rotza sheyalu mei atachten al gabi ritzvas aliyah. And the Rebbe Rashav wanted that the water should overflow the bottom boil into the top boil. Hine harei ze zriya be'oifen hayoyser moyu. Very important words. This form of filling up the water is the best form of zriya. Bunch of reasons, yeah. She'ein tzorich hashoko klal lekol hadayis. That does not need, then you don't need any hashaka whatsoever. Move on. Simple. Yeah. Gam. Im lo yalu. Ow. If you can't, you don't have enough rainwater to overflow until it goes above the floor. You have to direct that the mayim she'uvim should fall directly on top of the hole of the bottom board. The hainu zriya, that's zriya. What are you adding by having a boy zriya min hatzad? You know, maybe you want to have it as a backup in case the bottom board gets ruined. Yeah. So that is essentially the aside of boil gabe boil, according to the Rebbe, is first nekuda to know is you're toiveling in the actual boil of rainwater. Second of all, because the floor is not separating it. Second of all, when you overflow the water, you're adding water to an existing mikveh kosher. The floor doesn't exist over there. It's as if it's bottled, that Rebbe uses the words. And in addition to it, to adding water to a kosher mikveh, you're also, if you overflow the floor, it's a zriya b'oifen hayoyser moyel. It's the best form of zriya. And if you pour it on top of the holes, because you don't have enough rainwater that you open, the city water should fall directly on top of the hole of the bertachten, then it's zriya. That is the aside of boir al gabi boir. Now,
Is that the facade if you have also the zriya outside, when you have a bit al gabi?
you could always make boir savas yisrael as many as you want around the mikveh. There, you'll see afterwards about adding.
What we do when you clean out the mayim shuvim? You clean out the mayim shuvim once a week, whatever.
You don't clean out the mayim shuvim once a week.
How?
If you have a good filter, you can only have to clean it once a year. City pools don't change the water once in 20 years, but we're not going to get to there. Okay, let's go through the concept of a boir zriya. Yeah. Why is this a zriya b'oifen hayoyser moyo? You do a regular zriya is based on what it says in the Mishnah. Yeah, Shulchan Aruch. You have a boil, you overflow that boil goes into another boil, and that's considered zriya. There is a big machlekes rishonim if zriya bezoichlin has any effect. Zriya bezoichlin, because when the Mishnah is talking about this, the overflowing of Maya, the Maya is machshav bezoichlin. A mikveh which is zoichel is not a mikveh. When you add water to a boir zriya, and as you add water, it comes out the other side, right now that mikveh is zoichel. That box of rainwater is zoichel. So there's no zriya, according to many of the Rishonim. Not only, what are you doing then? You're adding city water into the boil. That water is pushing into the water into the next boil. You didn't kasher the mayim shuvim, because it ain't zriya b'zoichlin, according to some of the Rishonim. Not only you didn't kasher that, you passled your boil zriya, because you pushed the water out. You don't know picheshbon how much went in, how much went out. And according to those Rishonim, might be a shaila that your boir zriya right now is actually filled with mayim shuvim that never became kosher. So there's different opinions. There's some people which came up with the idea that you make a pipe that goes down, that the Mayim She'uvim are going to go deep into the Boyer Zriya. And then it's going to take time till it pushes up the rainwater, and it's not going to start by Schila. So the mikveh, because the mikveh is filled up till here. Now you're adding city water, it's going down. The hole is right here. You push it up, the water has to push up. So it doesn't become zeichel right away. It becomes kosher when the water pours in. That water. That works for the first amount of water, how much ever space you have over there.
What about the rest of the water? Like, you need more than just
Yeah, so the Marasham says the whole issue of schila that doesn't become kosher is talking about Mayim Shuvim. So make Hamshacha before the Mayim Shuvim. At least the water is not going to be Mayim Shuvim. So at least you're not going to be poisel the water that you have in the existing Ber Zriya. You're just going to, okay, so maybe we'll rely that this Ein Zriya will follow Shittas that there is Zriya B'Zeichlin to a certain degree. Yeah, then so now then there is a now the whole concept. Now just to remind you that the whole concept of Ein Zriya B'Zeichlin, the way we read it over here, if you put the pipe in and it goes down to the bottom, yeah, like we just explained before, this only is a problem not according to the Tzemach Tzedek. If you remember, I explained to you according to Tzemach Tzedek, the concept of schila is only the water that's right next to the hole. Under the hole, if it's not all going to go out, even according to the Rosh, there's 40 sah under the hole, then that water is not zeichel. Only water that's zeichel is the water that's right by the hole. So according to Tzemach Tzedek, you don't really have that problem. If you do the pipe. If you do it straight on top, the water just never had a chance to be nizra. But if you don't do it straight on top, you put the pipe down, according to Tzemach Tzedek, the way he understands schila, you don't have the problem. Because he doesn't follow the Mordechai, doesn't follow those opinions, which he says Pasuk is like the Rosh. So if you have 40 sah under it, especially if you have a double shear in the Ber Zriya, you have 40 sah on the bottom and the rainwater hits the middle, so then you make the pipe to hit above the 40 sah line, but this 80 sah, and the water hits right in the middle. So then you have 40 sah of kosher above, 40 sah of kosher below. The water pushes, becomes nizra. There's no schila. It's mashbeiden. Because the only part of the mikveh zeichel is what's on top, not what's on the bottom. The kosher water and the city water became nizra in the bottom. Huh?
Why is not problem
That's also an issue. Is also an issue. It's another issue of the Ber Zriya is that if you say that it's a schila, that it did not become, it goes in, goes out, you for sure have a problem, not on se'av, not on se'av, and not on se'av. So you have, some people would say, there's another solution, you put a cork, where the Ber Zriya is filled. One of the other ideas is the Ber Zriya is not filled till the top with rainwater, and you have enough space to add the city water into it. You pull the plug, You pull the plug, let all the water out until it goes below the hole, close the plug, fill it up again, pull it out again. Then you just have a problem of the hand, pulling out the cork. So you have to have a hamshacha, 3 tvachim between the Ber Zriya and the Ber Titayvon. Yeah, there's different. Well, the turn is a chumrah. 3 tvachim at least, yeah.
You have to wait. If the budget isn't big enough, you're going to have to wait for
3-4 times, yeah. Not for make shamim, because if it's closed, no, it has to make shamim 40 sah. And then it has above it place for more, and it's above higher than the hole. So then the hole is closed. You fill it up, it all becomes nizra, fills up to the top. You pull the plug, comes out until it goes to the bottom. All that water is kosher. You do it a second time and the third time until you fill up your mikveh. There is the issue of nasan sa'av and not al sa'av, but the shaila is if it becomes, according to the Ritva, there's still an issue. Yeah, of nasan sa'av and not al sa'av to a certain degree. But according to Ravid, according to Ritva, yeah.
If you do it like that, then you could end up with stuffing very many showing in Ber Zriya. But in the boat still, you're not gonna have really big shop.
But that's all kosher water. Makes no difference.
Kosher because it was nizra.
Because it was nizra.
But
So
now the problem about everybody isn't a problem, and the water that comes out.
it's nizra. If it's nizra, it's all kosher.
You could say the same thing for the not to be a problem in the boat LA.
No, because what we say is it wakes up. All the water wakes up over here. When it becomes nizra, once to the next one.
So it only wakes up in the boat not in the boat Zilla. It only wakes up in the boat
According to some shit, this is the art of Shonim which hold that the zriya only works by Ibn Koima. We're going to get to it soon.
Any other place for the shop that's in Zuriya that you're
Goes to another place, it's a
it's
problem.
empty?
Yeah. That's it. I was about to get to it. The next problem you have with zriya is that when it moves from one place to the next place, some people say, or we explained it when we discussed the whole Nasan Savanat and the whole issue, that the water reawakens its status when it's in a new place, new location. So when it fills up the zriya, yes, it became kosher over here, but when it overflowed to the next bird, that bird became, in that bird, the Mayim Shuv and Maradoiv, and they reawaken, Chayzer V'Neir, and they reawaken and become fully a problem of Shuvim. So, we have a few problems with Zriya. First of all, Zriya b'Zeichel. If the mikveh is Zeichel, there's an issue of Nasan Sa, and there's an issue of it's not making the water kosher. If it's going to another place, there are the Shainim which are machmir that the Zriya gets cancelled. There's a mashmos, I said, there's a mashmos from the Ritva about it also. There's a Zriya is cancelled. It's also mashma from the Raiva that the Zriya doesn't really work in such a scenario. And then all you have is hashaka. Yeah, the most you can have with that water is you're going to have to make it kosher through hashaka. So what's Zriya v'oifen hayosim? So we go according to the Rebbe's letters. You have a mikveh that's filled with rainwater till above the floor. Now that bird, what's the water is above the floor and the water under the floor is one big bird. So when you add the water into it, you're adding water to a mikveh kosher. That water became zriya. Every drop of water that falls into that bird becomes zriya. It becomes nizra, it's not zeichlin. The rainwater is in one place. So you solve the problem of zeichlin. So it's not a shayla zriya but zeichlin, it's in one place. It's not going to another place. It's one bird. So you solve the problem of zriya moving to another place. Shayla of nasan sa v'natal sa, you have much less. Why? Because the amount of water that you have on the floor, when you overflow the floor, or even when you have the two holes and directly on top of the holes, the amount of water that's going to be pushed up to the top from the rainwater is very little. Because what happens is the water can't put pressure through water. If water falls, if you have a pipe, it pushes all the water down. When you pour water on top of existing water, it will take time for the water to push down through, even with a lot of pressure. The more pressure you have, the more it'll push, huh?
Isn't it still the same place? This isn't the whole thing. It's one big bird.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, I'm getting to the point of it. There's a shiloh of nasan sav and natal sav. The bottom bird doesn't happen as much as when you have a bird next to a bird. You have a bird next to a bird. All the water in the bird shakes and moves. Huh? Yeah, it's going to be a natal in 6 months. But when you do the natal, the amount of natal you're doing is much less than what would have been done if you would have a bird next to a bird. Because the pressure of water to push. Huh?
The water doesn't on its own.
No, we're going to get to that soon. The water pushes, but it only pushes the top. So you have, let's say, there's an inch of water above the floor. City water becomes nizra in that, and it rises up a little bit. Yeah?
And the pressure from the filters doesn't do anything?
We're not talking about the filters now.
No, it's a heavy rain.
We're not discussing the filters. Then a little bit more water adds up into it. Now the new water became nizra, and the water that was already nizra, and it continues all being nizra as one package. So you're in one bird, it became nizra, it's not leaving anywhere. So how much rainwater moved up to the top bird? Not a lot. Not all the water, not even half of the water. Don't forget, you have double shear in the bottom. Double shear, that each shear is double. Chaim Noah's shear. Talking about you have 4 shiurim, really, of mikveh in the bottom boil. More, it could be more, yeah, 4 or 5. Well, let's say according to the biggest shear, you have double. And some of the water moves. If you have a good filtering system, that you're not changing the water, good cleaning system, you're not changing the water, and especially if you have a filter that doesn't take the water out of the mikveh and bring it back in, then the chances of you're going to have to clean the mikveh once a year. So once a year, it will take you, or change the water once a year, once every half a year.
There's places that change so
If it's places that have very high usage, yeah, I'm sure mikveh meir changes it more often than once a year. But usually you don't have to change it so often. So you're going to go through, by the time you're going to make the ber tachten have less than 21 sa'av make shamim left. Not according to the biggest share. According to the share that halacha, Chaim Noah's share, so they have a long time. It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years. Depends how often you change the water.
What's the exact calculation? How do you calculate?
There is no way of calculating. It depends on what filter you have. It depends on the pressure of the water. It depends on the size of your mikveh. If it's wide, if it's tall. There's no way of knowing. Each place you decide where. But the mikveh is becheskas kashrus until proven otherwise.
You tell them when you suggest them changing that.
No, I tell them in a year they should call me and tell me how many people used it.
But in general, does Kavod change water also if they don't have to, like as clean wine? Do they do it?
Clean one? I don't know.
Let's say New York, it rains a lot.
I have no idea. I didn't do a survey. Huh?
Water, you test chemicals to water for like rainwater versus city water.
Oh, so we're gonna get to it
And
now.
you have to rely on such.
We're gonna get to it now. Let's go back to this booklet. Go to page Kuf Nun Zayin. Yeah. Pashut shebemokim shelo yaskimu lemikveh zeh al gav zeh, in a place where there is no people are not going to allow you to do boil gav boil, then the Rebbe said have both boilers. Min hatzad shnayim zriya v'la shoka v'zriya na shoka boil min hatzad. When you can't have one. Yeah. And then the next one you have. Next page, you also have the same thing that you have two boilers of make shamim, one for Ashoka, one for Zriya. And the same in the next letter also. It's all talking about scenarios when you don't have boiler gabe boiler. It says don't rely on one, make both. There's a pasna. They translate it as a reservoir. It's talking about the city. It's the reservoir of rainwater to fill up the boilers. No. In the Eitzer on the side. Yeah. And then you have a letter about the Nasa and other side. Now I want to go to, after you finish these pages, after page Kuf Nun Tes, you have a minor of the Rebbe from Tafshin Mem. This is a very important minor to understand. This minor was to a Lubavitcher Rav who wrote some interesting questions to the Rebbe in Halacha, quite a few. And this was first published by Rabbi Lazar Eichik, and afterwards it was published in this Shura. Over here it's clear the division of what the Rebbe's answer in each paragraph is, so I took it from here. The letter that he wrote to the Rebbe starts like this. This is page 20. Erev B'negeya, he says he's talking about Takonas Admur Morashab, the Beragabe Boyd. He asked the Rebbe a question. He's barer ayidei ha'askonim the mikveh tahara depoi. He discovered, according to the askonim of the mikveh here, shalafidas mumchei hamado. According to the scientists, af be'oifen kozeh, even when you have a boil gabe boyd, that we understand that it changes much slower. Kol hamayim mis'arvim me'atzma. The water is going to anyways mix from itself. The molecules of water, you can understand them, they move up and down, it becomes one. B'meshech zman kotzer beyoyser, a very short time, u'bifrat b'meik shamim mayim shuvim, especially when you have rainwater versus mayim shuvim. Li shamayim hashuvim kvedim yoyse l'regel hamineralim v'chulu shebetoichem. Especially in the places where he was writing, where the city water was heavier due to minerals. Yeah, gam osu be'atzmam in the laboratories. Kama v'kama nisyonis ba'ofanim shoynim. They did different kinds of tests. They tested the salts and the minerals. They just tested with colored water. They did a bunch of tests, and they all determined that the water all mixes and becomes one very, very fast. It's clearly visible, like the scientists say. Yeah, and he gives you an exception. So on the bottom he says, he says an exception. When the bottom part is made from well water, when it's heavy with minerals, or when you mix salt into the bottom part. Right? I claim I hold that there's no stira. Even though the mayim shuvim are heavier, the poil, because the top part is hot, the bottom part is cold, so it changes. But if it's going in the laboratories, they use it with glass, and over there the glass transfers the heat faster, evens out the heat, so therefore that's it. Ushelosi uvakashosi. Yes, the Rebbe. What is the point where I'm getting it wrong? Explain to me, and I'll explain it to the scientists. So now, don't turn the page, because you don't know what the Rebbe wrote yet. The first page we have, before on the general letter, the Rebbe wrote Tzarich Chiyun. It's in a gray box, top of the second column, on page 20. Tzarich Chiyun l'mi koydem adonim. Tzarich Chiyun, who are these people? What do you call scientists? The Chol Oifen. Mi she'einu yedei she'ein mei be'erechot shovel ha'sheni b'chol prat dehanal. V'lachas kam v'kam b'negel ha'klal. First of all, somebody who thinks that that he doesn't know that every well is different. Regarding rainwater also, the echad l'sheni. V'chein b'negel mayim she'uvim imokim echad l'sheni. And also, when it comes to mayim she'uvim, from one place to another place, that means you want to start making rules over here that all the water mixes together based on some testing in laboratory, and you don't take into consideration that every beit is different, every rainfall is different, and every mayim she'uvim is different. And still the scientist goes ahead and makes you general rules. He's completely not a scientist. In other words, first thing is, these guys that you went to don't know what they're talking about.
That was against statistics and science?
No. On the part where he writes that when you see that the water mixes very fast, the Rebbe writes on the side, even in the cup of tea, you see the difference. If you're not going to use it, you'll see that the tea is not going to mix as fast as these people say.
Pressure of water from I'm sure it's not without a pipe, but automatically it's going to cause the water to go down.
Very little.
Why?
Huh? So it depends how much it is. Yeah. Now, by the way, in the end of his the next page. What's Pshat Nativak? Put a T. Yeah.
And the mineral, the city water.
Whatever it is, you see that the water doesn't mix right away. No, this is heavier. What do you know? It doesn't mix right away. But the point is, it does not mix right away. Don't say everything mixes in 1 second.
People tabling in and out a bunch of times. Does it affect the bottom part tremendously?
Very little, because there's only 2 small holes to move the water. No, it doesn't. You have to stand on top of the hole and move the water and get all the water from the top. You'll stick your hand to the bottom bar, you're going to feel it cold. Swim into the bottom of the mikveh, stick your hand into the bottom bar that's under the steps, and you stick your hand in, and you'll feel it's cold. Even when the top mikveh is hot.
Wait, but hold on, the point of these scientists, even though I'm talking every
they're saying is that it all evens out, and therefore.
True, the water doesn't even out.
Water evens out very fast. You put salt, it evens out very fast. That means if it's hot on the top and on the bottom, and the minerals on the top and on the bottom, you're going to test. You're going to see it evens out very fast. The minerals even out very fast.
So what doesn't even out of the water?
The water does. That's in the next letter. Yeah. Anyways, he asks a few more questions. The Rebbe says, "Yidaber b'chol zeh im harazash dvorkin." Yeah. Then he came back and he writes another letter. This is a longer letter. This is on page 21. Now, I did not understand what the Rebbe wrote. I'm going to clarify what my questions were. And then on this one, the Rebbe answered on each one. 1. Hamadonim. Now, at least he puts them in quotes. The scientists. And they told me that they spoke with people that are professionals in two separate say clearly, it's a standard that happens regularly, that the water, fusion, everything merges and mixes together. Right? That's what the Rebbe says. On this, the Rebbe says, you look, again, in quotes, you're going to find scientists that say the opposite. So that's for starters. Like, don't get yourself mixed in with science. 2. The people of the mikveh made a glass form of a mikveh to use to do tests. And they did different tests. Nasnu one way, Nasnu make shamim umayim she'uvim lebdiko kimis. First they gave my rainwater and city water to chemical testing to see the chemical composition. Shehera chilukim gdoilim b'mineralim v'chulu shebebeis me'miselo. Very big differences in the minerals. Then they poured one on top of the other very carefully. They left it there for a few days. Then they took out the water from each one. They marked it separately. The test results as kimat no difference between the Meik Shamim and the Mayim She'uvim. The Rebbe right away adds, B'negeya l'mineralim. What difference you didn't find is regarding the minerals. So, simply explain, the minerals travel. The water didn't change. Just because the halachic definition of water changing is not the scientific definition that a molecule of salt traveled from the bottom bar to the top bar. That's the first nikuda. So, just because the water molecules travel from one to another, carrying the chemicals, carrying the minerals, the salt, and those things from one to another, does not mean that the water changed. It means,
What is water if not at all?
No, the molecules of the salt and those things that moved up and down.
Not the molecules of the water.
H2O did not
Relocate. H2O did not relocate.
The H2O is also molecules.
Right. So I'm saying,
That's exactly what I said. That the fact that the science tells you the moves as the minerals relocate, not the actual water, did not change. The second test they did was with color. They added color to one of the boiras. There was a specific kind of color that was not separate from the water, but that the water absorbed the color. It wasn't that just like parts of color floated around the water, but rather the water and the color became one. After a short time that the water did not move, The color became the same exact color in both sides. And there's no difference if you put the color in the bottom, color on the top. The only difference, he says, if he says, if it was the same kind of water, then it went faster. If it was a different kind of water, it took a little bit longer because it had to also even out the chemicals and everything else. Yeah, and then the tzeva hishtav, then the color evened out. He says, when there was on top, when the rainwater and the city water, the rainwater was on the bottom and the city water was on top, the color evened out much faster. The only exception was, that's the two stars is in the next page, the only exception was when the bottom bar was made be'er, which is heavier. But so the Rebbe, talking about adding color, the Rebbe says like this. When they said that they made a test with adding color, Yatif tipas dioi achas the kois mayim, take a drop of ink into 1 cup of water. Within immediately, that drop of color will affect the whole cup. Actually, depends what the composition of the color is. But if you have a liquidy color that will join in the cup, will very fast change. The whole water will get colored. Does that mean that all the water just now mixed? You don't see the water is sitting in the cup, it's not moving anywhere. You dropped 1 drop of color. The color got absorbed into the whole water. Does that mean that the water changed, that the water moved? It means that the color traveled and spread. And when he says the next thing, when he says that the color evened out between the bottom bar and the top bar, the Rebbe says nois tzeva. What carries the color, the molecules of color evened out in both. Again, the water did not change. The molecules of the color traveled from one to another. So he asks like this. V'hashayla, question. And how does this fit with the Rebbe Rashab Stakana? What does it help us with the Rebbe Rashab Stakana of Be'er Gabe Boyd? And now we see that when it's in the same, so to speak, when it's in the same board, it evens out very fast, it travels fast. So now you have the shilas on fakert. According to science, it would make more sense when you have board b'tzad board, not board agabe board. It's much harder for the water to even up when it has to travel up and then go down. Mashenkim just has to go up and down.
That's if no one's using them.
If no one's using them. Yeah. Ha'im lepoil ha'kavona. Next question. Ha'kavona shebe'er gabe gam b'meshech zman orech shana v'yoyis lo yisavu mayim al yenim v'tachtainim. Does this mean that even in the Be'er Gabe Boyd, even in a long time, like a year, for example, it uses their year, the water is not going to mix? Third question. And if the kavana is as so, she's meshech zman orech lo yisavu mayim al yenim v'tachtainim, is it actually a shinu godol midas hachem shemayim yenim v'tachtainim? Is it only when there is a difference, a big difference in temperature, that the bottom bar is cold and the top bar is hot? And if it's only dependent on temperature, then what's going to happen if you warm up the water inside the mikveh? You pour it in cold and then you warm it up, or you let it cool down in the mikveh. Now, whoever learned towards the end of the siman, it talks about heating up a mikveh. In the Achreinim, the end of the Lechem V'Simla, you'll see it, that he brings the opinions which say that even according to the Machmirim about a warm mikveh, it's only when you pour hot water into the mikveh. But when you poured cold water and then you warmed it up, it's not a problem. Just side note. So what he's saying is you have the two baitas, one on top of another. There's warm water, and there is... If it's only, what causes the water not to change? That was his question. Maybe even when there's no difference in the temperature. Maybe it has to do from the example of the tish. I didn't understand what the Rebbe said with this. Maybe if the whole idea of ber al ber is the water shouldn't change, maybe if you don't have a mikveh ber al ber, you should make the hashaka on the side ber al gabe ber.
How would you do that?
Like a lot of the Ungarish should do. The ber hashaka is double ber.
What do you gain by having a double ber?
It doesn't change. If the whole idea is it shouldn't change, it doesn't change over there either. He tells the Rebbe, if it's going, once I understand what the logic behind this is, then I will understand what the best solution for this is. On this, the Rebbe answered, there's an answer in the top of the letter, which is in the previous page, on page 21, and an answer at the end. Bechol oifen, the Rebbe writes regarding the whole letter. 1. L'chulei alma, according to him, bazu al gabe zu, when it's one on top of another, ha'is'arav was kosher yoiser, ve'itis yoiser, u'pochis b'shleimus. The mixing of the water from the top bar to the bottom bar is harder, slower, and less complete. That means the moving of the water. Again, you have to remember that Rebbe is going on the opinion that there's a fact that the chemicals and the color travels doesn't mean the water travels. So the water moving is much harder to relocate and mix the water from the bottom to the top and the top to the bottom when it's one on top of another rather than one next to another. Masher abrera acher zu betzadzu, the one next to another. 2. Keshemidas hachoim hishtave ein zeraya kla shamayim misarvo. When just because even if the temperature will even out between the top bar and the bottom bar, it doesn't mean that the water mixed. Umateches yichiach. And the metal will prove to you that the metal can have that the temperature of the way I understand it is temperature and metal. If you take a spoon, you stick it into soup, it'll be hot across the whole thing. You learned it in the other day also about metal, that the heat travels in smicha, and that doesn't mean that all the metal in the spoon just got mixed up together. 3. When the salt gets mixed, what proof is that the water moved? You have a raya from Hilchos Melicha. The salt is sitting on top, pulls all the blood out, and the meat does not move anywhere. So the salt can have an effect of traveling, moving, and it doesn't have that effect of, doesn't mean that anything moved. The salt moved, not anything else. And towards the end of the letter, there's another where the Rebbe discusses about the changing of the color. Yeshna meitzvoim. There are colors. Shekemoisam tzveya meo elef kocha v'yoyser kamus mayim. Ma ze shayach li'ira b'mayim. First point is, you could get to colors that one drop could color, concentrated colors could color hundreds of thousands of times that amount. The pure artificial coloring, the way it's sold before dilution, could color a lot more than the one you use for cakes is already diluted 100 times. But the ones before, and even that, you put 3 drops and you could color the whole thing. The original one, you could color a lot more. So just because the color is even doesn't mean that anything else changed. And then he says, just by the way, Yishal Madoni Manal Hanochin Shebokiano, so Bekama Yom Shechak, Rish Ada Yem Chilukim Chashuvim Verabim Menshechvis Hamayim Elamayla Lamata. Ask the scientists, is it true that when in the oceans and in other seas that were researched, there even until today, big differences and important differences between different levels of water? You will see, there's no separation, there's nothing, and you will see. Truth is, you could see it in certain places where waters from rivers mix with the sea, and we have different colors in the water. Sometimes you could have in the...
That is the side.
No, so you have on top, you have the water on the surface, has a much different chemical composition than the water going down. That's why certain fish will go swim lower, certain fish go higher. Certain things grow higher, certain things do not live on a higher level of the water. It depends on what the fish needs. Some fish need very mineral-rich water. Some fish need more oxygen, fish need less oxygen, and the water, different fish go in different levels of the ocean. Okay, so this is the Rebbe's minus regarding mixing. Basically, the fact that you see chemically that the water combines does not mean that the water mixes. Practically, it's much slower for the water to mix, the actual water to mix, and therefore, by definition, if you choishesh to not yourself and not you're going to have much less often to change the water. You still should be changing the water, but again, it's not so often.
They didn't respond how often, but you're
The Rebbe did not respond. They respond how often. Because again, I'm telling you, it's not clear. You don't know. You can't say a klal on how often. You can't compare a mikveh where 500 people go every morning, where the water is going to move around, and each person goes 9 times in, than to a mikveh where 3 women go at night. And each one goes slowly without checking the water. And you can't compare a mikveh which has a external filter, which makes the water move faster, than a mikveh which has an internal filter, which the water doesn't move as fast. And depends where the axis, it also depends where the water pushes in. If the city water is coming on top of the holes, might have changed a little bit more in the beginning. If the city water is coming on top of the floor, like the Rebbe originally says, change less. It all depends. Every mikveh is different. To make a klal, some mikvahs in some places you might have to change every 6 months. Some places you might have to change in 3 years. Some places you don't have to. It's not, you're not going to want to change because you're not going to have enough rainwater. In a place where you have to get ice or whatever it is, or it takes you a year to fill up a mikveh, you can't afford to shut down the mikveh for a year. If you have oitza, then you have to build in place like that. You build the oitza, which slowly fills up, and then you could change it when you have your oitza is full. Your oitza is full, you change the water of the mikveh. Or in places like Florida, you don't have to worry about it. You change the water. You know when the rainy season is, you could change the water within the night. You could probably have, if it's the right time of the year, within the night to fill up your mikveh again. You might even be able to fill up the top of it also. Depends on how big your roof is. The next, I gave you just an interesting, this is from Shuchat Chasa, page 137, 138, 139, and 140 is a plan of a mikveh that was done by Rabbi Shmuel Pesach Bogomilsky when he was a bacher. He went to American Shluchas to Afghanistan, and he had to draw a plan for a mikveh. He sat with Rabbi Telushkin, and Zalman Shimon edited the plan, and was given to the Rebbe. The Rebbe put a few comments on it. I typed it up, and you have it over here. You go through, you'll see interesting things. For example, the Rebbe makes the bottom part also to be tall, big, that the person could fit into it. Regarding the gutters, you'll see over here how the Rebbe says that they should be open on both ends. Then he has about filling the mikveh. You see on page 139, bottom hole and at least floor of top hole should be filled with rainwater. And then the Rebbe says bottom hole should be filled with rainwater. It means the Rebbe changed. Number 3 used to be written bottom hole, at least floor of top hole should be filled with rainwater. The Rebbe says bottom hole should be filled with rainwater, and at least floor of top hole covered completely. There's another interesting thing over here that the Rebbe did not edit. The Rebbe left it as is and approved it. The first time, fill it up both with rainwater. The top bite also.
Yeah, someone trained in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Why? First time not to say that.
No, it's easier to do it. Okay, now we're going to go into page 140 and on. It's important you say this for understanding the importance of being Lubavitcher Mikveh and not being impressed or pressured by outside influences. First, mine page 140.
Why did it take so long
To what?
to build the bed?
I don't know. I wasn't here. Number 1. I was born afterwards. Metair mikre meshune. Chabad adir sheba. Chabad hoidiu sheboinim mikveh v'hakoil muzman mishtamish bo. The Rebbe says like this. Says the Rebbe, this is a minor to a place. The Rebbe says they invited everyone to use it. The Rebbe says like this. Al pi Shulchan Aruch, page 140. Al pi Shulchan Aruch, underlined. Chabad tzricha livnes al pi psak din Rabboni Chabad mikama v'kama shonim hamefursum. Chabad built according to the psak din of Rabboni Chabad. Build a mikveh according to Rabboni Chabad. What is it referring to over here? There was only 2 Piskei Dinim when it came to mikvahs in those years. Only one was Mikama V'Kama Shana. And that was the Rishima of Rabbi Yankel. So obviously he's talking about Beir Gabe Beir. Revav is Bnei Yisrael Nagin Kenkem Mefursum. Tens of thousands of Yidden are already using such mikvahs. Yeah. Hitziu Lohem, they told the people that they should build, that they're going to stop the Chabad mikveh until they finish building the community mikveh, and they already told them that they're going to build the mikvehs in the Chabad way. So then he says, "Kvanano, ein inyanim likanz hamachlekes v'lo lepolitika v'lo lecherech mishu v'chol." He says, going and joining and making the other mikveh or waiting until the other mikveh is ready. Don't get involved in machlekes, don't get involved in politics, and don't force anybody. Continue where you were holding it. You planned on building a mikveh. Ve'yivnu Chabad hamikvahs ba'atzom. Chabad will build their own mikvahs. Ve'ein la'acherim lichbeis aleim l'tzeinu. Nobody should force Lubavitchers how to make their mikvahs. Mitei chazmona b'sever panim yafus b'kosher shekol yitztaref tovel of bracha v'god lashon v'chulu. Anybody wants to join in the Chabad mikveh is on today. Another community wants to build their own mikveh. But Yazazlu boy, don't make fun of them. Yeah, and don't scream at them for doing it. Do it nicely. Next letter. This is a letter to Rabbi Chanzen. This is Eretz Yisrael Toshin Yud Beis. The previous was Toshin Mem Beis. It was already famous. This is Toshin Yud Beis. This is about a year and a half after the Rebbe got the Rabbi Yankel Landau's Rishima on mikvahs. Over here, it's a long letter, and the Rebbe says that he says regarding Mashikoisim Michtov in the Gela in Mikveh Nechacha Pidim Apilbo Shagotai in the Gela Tzadabes Chashishan Lamish the Nicholas Begedish Nitzachim. Yeah, he says this whole argument is not relevant. Kibalav Achen moving a double call the Arer al Oifen Asias Mikveh Shagdeli Yisrael Mikama Chugim Bedele Shavro Shabatuach Hashagam Hem Yadu Perek V'Limud Hashas Yishanim V'Achreinim V'Gdeli Yisrael V'Kovas Reis Mapizah. Yeah, it says to go argue with people about how to make the mikvahs. They all know how to do it. Chabad doesn't have the toikef, the strength to stand up for the mikvahs the way they should build it. Even after the Rebbe gave a hirah, they should be strong about it. Yeah, and therefore he says, and then it says, I don't want to push on it, but they should go strong on it. The next letter to him, a few months later, Samachti b'moed livoda sheb'machne Yehuda sudra hamikveh kfiras hakat murmorashav v'zei oid raya o moifes muchashi. As men geht mit den emes mit kivus amatima, is fad dem emes veren alle bottle. Miskayemes haftochas hakadmur hazoken asher hoichem beikvoisav yatzlichu ba'avodosom b'toiro u'b'mitzvos. Then the next one is also a year later to Aguch in Eretz Yisrael. That the Merkaz Tras Mishpach in Yerushalayim, that they want Aguch to help. The Rebbe promised to help build mikvahs in Eretz Yisrael.
Was there any other back in Europe?
In Eretz Yisrael, no.
Or in Europe?
In Europe, the Rebbe Rashab had the Bells had there was in Bells. There was other mikvahs. There's in Eretz Yisrael from 2 years ago. There's an article from Baruch Haberland, the 2 articles that discuss it. And then the Rebbe says they should help out with building mikvahs and mituvam lisboinen. One boy. Mitzvah 142. Mituvam lisboinen sayeh be'echad ha'mekayim esalo be'simok mishal kapom esivos sham pulas Chabad ועוד האחת שצריכה המקווה לעשה בהסם לרעס חק אדמו"ר מרשבנה כיוון שהוא הפויסק שלנו. הנה ילבבש כמי דכדוע גם בדין אשר בעשר דרב צריך לסנק דווקא כרב, אף כי בעשר לשמוחו. There's no issue of Leitzis Goy to do it, says the Rebbe says, ואין בזה עניין of Leitzis Goy מכמתם וכו'. וככויסב ענייני זה כדי שיעיינו בזה. I'm writing to you that you have to dafka go into the shop, so you should think about it. כיוון שבטח ישתדלו עצמם, because people are going to convince you, last is dafka piras אחרת, so do dafka not according to the Rebbe shop. So move on, don't go to war about it. שאין comes from a chomer, לא להסביר, שזה היפך הדין להכריח את מישהו שלא יקיים כדברי פסק רבי. To force somebody to go against his own Rebbe is wrong. בפרט בעניינים כאלו, שמקבועס אלו ואלו כשלים הם הפעילים לכל הדייס. או שיש שם אחד אין לא צריך, דס פויסקים אלו בביטרון, דס פויסקים אחרים, ויש עושים להיפך. Some people are going to build a mikveh, being mahadar to follow one posek, and by that, automatically they're going to be mevater another posek. And some are going to do the other way. But nobody could force the other one to make a mikveh. So when we build for the Bible, it has to be like this. So what happens when you have a problem that people don't want, that don't allow you to just do boil like boil? So you have a few answers of the Rebbe about it. That's in the bottom of page 142. First one is regarding building a mikveh in Melbourne, Tavshin Chav Beis. Binyanim, over there he wrote that he wanted to make a bird of a bird. The city Rabbanim were maskim. However, they wanted also a bird zriyah min atzad. And the Rabbi writes, "B'chol tova hatza'asel shebemokim shemesiba matzia alas is bird amachshim min atzad." If they want to make a bird min atzad, poshat lachrenos is base birds machshir min base. Dodim echad yizri v'shein base al yashok v'nochem b'moim. Says over there we're talking about that Rabbanim wanted to add another. The city Rabbanim were masking to Baragaber, but they wanted the bird zriyah. They said if you're already doing minatzad, do both hashaka and zriyah. Yeah. What?
Once you have a bird, what's the matter when you go from outside?
You don't need them. Over here we're talking about the city wanted. The Rabbanim of the town were not ready.
They wanted both from outside?
No, they wanted to make another one for Zriyah. First letter.
One. The same, from outside.
You said the Rebbe said if you're doing already, then make both. That's what it seems like. But then the next letter seems like it wasn't like that. Next letter you see that the Rebbe writes to him a few weeks later. That's Poshish b'mokum shelo yaskim on the mikveh zagab bezeh yishlasses min atzad or shnayim l'zriyah l'shakav. Here it seems like they were not masking to b'agab boyer. They only wanted min atzad, and that's when the Rebbe said do both.
Why?
What? Why do hashaka and zriyah?
Yeah.
Because you don't have one. You don't have b'agab boyer, so do both.
No, you have to.
No, we're talking about here. It's lo yaskimu.
The first one.
The first one seems I don't know why specifically. You yaitz all the shittas. If you're already doing yaitz all the shittas, it's the same person. You have a bunch of issues with anybody. I'm saying, but you have both, so you solve it. You have less problems. But you have other problems with Zriyah. Maybe it's Zriyah B'Zerch, and you have other issues with it. There's no, but I don't know. The next one is a letter from a Berel Baumgarten. He wrote to the Rebbe that in the Rebbe Rashab's mikveh, there's no mention of Zriyah. And in Milano, when Rabbi Perlov built a mikveh and he made a mikveh bird, there's no Zriyah. And he asked Perlov, and Perlov told him he didn't make a bird Zriyah because there was no place for it. So he's asking if there is a place lahidur bozeh. There's a place to add a oitzer Zriyah, and the Rebbe responded, yesh mokim lahidur zeh. There is a place to add this hidur.
Add Zriyah.
Add Zriyah. Then there is another minor to somebody that there was a snagdus to build a mikveh boil agabe boil snagdus mekama vekama ba'ir. That's what he wrote to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe writes kedai kapashut. The Rebbe circled those words. It's for sure there has to be even if there's a snagdus. And if you're going to prevent machlaikas, by doing the following. You can also add a hashaka from the side. Right. There's different minors going different ways. Zriya and hashaka. You have one minor to Baumgarten. It's not a bad idea to have a zriya. Here you have one that they're going to do just hashaka.
That's used in addition to Brother.
The last one.
It's used in addition to Brother.
Yeah. The last Nakuda, the last minor is very important. It's the last minor date-wise that I found regarding this issue. This is Iyar Tafshin and Aleph. This was written to Australia. They wanted to build a Ber Agav Ber, and the people in the city, the Rabbi in the city, were against it. It's the Ritzchak Gordon, I think the Chaim Gutnik also. And the Rebbe responded, Kaposhut Shayach Litnoi Hamokim, regarding building a mikveh. It's obvious that it has to do with the place, the conditions of the place. V'hazman, and the time. V'shinuyav, and the difference, like there's different times, different places. You can't make one psak. V'apsak din enu l'chacham al mashein evrayis. The psak din, the chacham can only pass him based on what he sees. So the Rebbe says, I'm not in Melbourne, you're in Melbourne. You know what you see. You decide what the best way to go about this is. Avol, but Chosheshani, I have a chashash, Beloshen HaKosuv, like the Pasuk says, in Parashas Shlach. It talks about the Meraglim. When the Meraglim went to Eretz Yisrael, they came back, and they gave a report. And they said that the people were big, they were small. And they said, Vanihi be'eineinu kechagovim. It doesn't say Vanihi be'einehem kechagovim, it says Vanihi be'eineinu kechagovim. We looked like Chagavim. So the Rebbe says, when he beinenu kechagavim, v'achar and as a result, because you look at yourself as a Chagavim, u'ketotzah mizeh, v'chein hayinu beineihem. That's how you look at yourself like a Chagavim, v'chein hayinu beineihem. That's why they looked at you that way. And with this, conclude Shiur on Hilchos Mikvahs.
So did everybody